Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because many of us at Carnegie think that you're not going to solve the Iran problem without addressing the wider issue of the nuclear fuel cycle. That is, what Iran wants to do, it says, is allowed under the treaty. It wants to build an enrichment facility. Now, the problem isn't the nuclear reactors that Iran wants to build. Lots of countries have nuclear reactors. Most of those countries don't make their own fuel. They buy it from the 7 or 8 countries that sell it. Iran says it wants to enrich its own uranium. Now, you, really unprecedented in modern times of the IAEA, have been aggressively promoting solutions to the so-called fuel cycle problem. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what kind of progress you've made in recent months?
Sure. Joe, from where I'm sitting, I need to look at the big picture. I can be, pound, or penny, as they call it, penny wise, but pound foolish, I need to see how verification is really helping to curb the proliferation of nuclear weapons. The recent 800-pound gorilla I see is this whole idea of countries developing nuclear fuel cycle. Every country eventually will be able to sit on an enrichment factory. Well,
yes,
that means they are a few months away from a nuclear weapon.
Right. Because the same facilities that can enrich the fuel can also be used to enrich material for bombs.
Absolutely. And this maybe was okay in 1970 when we thought that the technology is still difficult to acquire. Technology is out of the tube. So what I've been going out preaching, that we need to revisit this whole framework of using nuclear energy for peaceful purpose, make sure that countries will get all they need in terms of reactor technology, fuel, but not necessarily having their own independent enrichment or reprocessing capability. I should tell you that I have, for the first time, and I think in 40 years, because this is not a new idea, but it's a new idea that its time has come, that we need to have a better control over the fuel cycle.
Yes.
What I'm really now advocating is an assurance of supply mechanism. Every country that would like to get the fuel, that would like to get the reactor, will get that, but not necessarily developing their own enrichment facility. An assurance of supply mechanism should be reliable, should be apolitical, should be based simply on non-proliferation criteria. So whether we like the regime in Iran, whether they like the regime in North Korea or in Ghana, as long as they comply with non-proliferation criteria, they will be able to get that assurance of supply.
So how would you do that? What's the mechanism you would
Well, the mechanism, it will be the IAEA, an international community represented by the IAEA, manning that regime. And we'll have an objective criteria, we'll have a redundance of suppliers.
Right, and this is one of the early ideas. In the beginning of the IAEA, there was this idea that
Correct.
you could be a fuel bank.
Correct. And that's frankly what we're trying to do now. Establish either an actual fuel bank or a virtual fuel bank. The reaction I've been getting, frankly, is very encouraging. The US have committed themselves to give us 17 metric tons of HEU to be blended into fuel. Russia said, as of January, once they become president of the G8, they will also give us material to be available for our use as part of the fuel bank.
When you say give, do you mean give?
I think that's what I understand. I mean, we have to still work out the details, but this is material coming out of weapons, frankly, from the military sector.
Yes.
So it's a good way to put it to good use.
Right.
Down blend it, use it as part of the fuel bank. The NTI, who came, Ted Turner and Sam Nunn, said that they are absolutely ready to give us a very generous amount, either of money to buy the fuel or nuclear material. So we are, I think, very close, hopefully, to be able, within next year, to establish that assurance supply. I say why this assurance supply is very important, because once you have an assurance supply, you are taking away the justification from countries to say, I would like to make my own fuel.
Right.
And that's 80% resolving the problem. I would like then to, absolutely, once we get the assurance supply, to couple that with a 10 years moratorium for any new enrichment facilities or reprocessing facilities, at the very least for newcomers.
So try to convince all the other countries to stop, to stay in place.
Moratorium, not give up their rights, because no country will give up their rights, but agree on a moratorium.
So Brazil, for example.
Well, Brazil now, I think they have their own enrichment facility. But my worry, at least, is to cap the number of countries that have.
How about the US?
Well, Ideally, I would like to have a cap on any new nuclear facility. Okay. By my worry is at least the newcomers, the countries who are. We have now like 12 or 13 countries who have that technology. Yes. I don't like to see that extending to 30. Right. I'd like to cap it, freeze it through a moratorium. And then the third phase will be to try to see, give us time, give us 5-10 years to try to see how we can have a better control of the existing facilities. I advance the idea of a regional approach, multinational approach. Yes. The Russians are very happy to manage an international center for the spent fuel, yes, for the reprocessing. Well, that's a good beginning. The most difficult part, which is the fourth part, is how to get the US, the Russian of the world, the Chinese of the world to accept a regional center, again, on their enrichment facility. But that's very much linked to the cut-off treaty, and that's something I'll come up to discuss when we discuss nuclear disarmament.
Right, so the fissile material cut-off treaty under negotiation for 10 years now? Try to get that treaty negotiated so that everybody stops making weapons material.
Frankly, it's an absolutely ridiculous that we're spending 10 years doing kabuki dance. Yes. Should we start the negotiation? Should we not start the negotiation? My take on this, for God's sake, let us start the negotiation. Whether it is verifiable, whether it should include the stocks, this is part of the negotiation.
Great. Let me touch on 2 more questions. I know there's a lot of people out there that are going to want to get a piece of you. One of the other things that you worry about a lot is securing the nuclear materials that already exist, securing the nuclear weapons that already exist, whether it's in the former republics of the Soviet Union or in the research reactors in some 40 countries. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this is again another 800-pound gorilla that came to the fore.
So we got 2 800-pound gorillas now.
Absolutely.
Okay, just
this came to the fore after 9/11. When we discovered that nuclear material is not simply there to protect it from a safety perspective, but from a security perspective, yes, vis-a-vis extremist groups. We know that they are sophisticated, the terrorism. We know that they are interested in acquiring the material. So the logical step, let us lock this material as fast, as good as we can. We have done a good work so far, but if I hear, we are not directly involved in Russia, but if I hear people like Samnan and others, they're saying we have done 50% of the job. We still have 50% of the job to do. Yes. Well, again, I always say we are in a race against time. We simply cannot afford any of such a material to fall into the wrong hands. Part of that, of course, that we still have a lot of this material running as part of the civilian fuel cycle. Research reactor, Joe, you mentioned. Yeah. We still have 99 research reactors around the world that runs on 90% or more highly enriched uranium. Well,
which could be used for weapons.
Absolutely. And there is absolutely no reason now, technical, economic, financial, to run the research reactor in 90% fuel. So with DOE, with Russia, with others, we're trying to convert all this research reactor to be run on low enriched uranium. I mean, these are common sense issues. Yes. Recently I was sitting in a meeting and we know the problem, we know the solution. Why aren't we connecting the dots?
Yes.